It was the middle of the morning. Harriet was walking home across the tobacco fields when she saw her mother, Rit, running after Mr. Brodess. "Master!" cried Rit as she ran. "Please, master, she's only 6 years old." Harriet began to tremble with fear, and her bare feet felt cold on the warm dirt. The empty water buckets she was carrying suddenly seemed as heavy as stones. The dark brown horse stopped in front of Harriet. She looked up past the horse's rolling eyes to Mr. Brodess, who was towering over her. "Girl," Mr. Brodess said briskly, "I'm sending you off to work for another farmer. Follow me, quickly now." "No!" Harriet cried, seeing the frightened look on her mother's face. "I don't want to go away." Mr. Brodess sighed impatiently and tapped Harriet with his riding whip. But Harriet couldn't move. She felt as if she'd been planted in the dirt. Mr. Brodess raised his whip again. Suddenly Harriet dropped the buckets and ran into her mother's arms. Rit held her daughter tight as the whip came down on her own back. "Out of the way, Rit," said Mr. Brodess. Leaning down from his horse, he pulled Harriet away from her mother and carried her over to a woman seated in a wagon at the side of the road. "Please, master," Rit begged as Mr. Brodess put Harriet on the wagon. "Don't take Harriet. She's the third baby you've taken from me." But Mr. Brodess had decided to rent Harriet out to a farmer's wife who was looking for a young slave girl. Brodess watched all the slave children as they grew. He noticed that Harriet carried water to the hot, thirsty slaves working in the fields. He saw that she helped her mother and father, who came home exhausted every night long after dark. So when Mrs. Cook came to rent a good worker, Mr. Brodess chose Harriet. As the wagon started off, Harriet could hardly see the dusty road through her tears. Behind her, she heard her mother calling, "Be strong, child, and the good Lord will help you." The wagon rattled on, taking Harriet farther and farther away from home. Would she ever see her family again? Harriet bit her lip and stared straight ahead, trying to be strong. But the tears wouldn't stop. Finally, she covered her face with her hands and sobbed. The next second, she felt a harsh blow on the back of her neck and heard her new mistress scold, "Stop that crying, girl. Now sit up and be quiet." "Yes, missus," Harriet whispered. Tears still trickled down her face, but she didn't make a sound. The sun had set by the time they came to the farm where Harriet was to work. She followed her mistress into the cooking shed next to the house. "Here's your supper," said Mrs. Cook. She handed Harriet a piece of cornbread from a pan next to the fireplace. "That's where you sleep, over there by the fire." She frowned at Harriet. "There'll be no laziness here. Be ready to work first thing in the morning." Mrs. Cook turned and went out, leaving Harriet alone in the small, dark shed. Harriet looked down at the cornbread in her hand. She couldn't eat. She curled up in the smoky corner with only her thin shirt for a blanket, and she cried herself to sleep. Early the next morning, Harriet began to work for Mrs. Cook. She was to help her mistress make cloth. "Here's where you stand, Harriet, and here is the yarn." Mrs. Cook spoke in a cross voice. "Now you pull carefully and wind the yarn like this." Harriet watched her mistress and tried to wind the yarn just right. "Like this, missus?" "Carefully, or you'll break it. Do this right, or I'll take the whip to you. Now you stand there and keep working." Harriet stood for hours and hours, winding the yarn and sneezing from the dust in the air. Every day she worked in the dusty room, and every night she slept close to the fire to keep warm. She often dreamed that she was back home, outside in the fresh, clean air, running through the woods while Daddy Ben cut down trees for Mr. Brodess. But her mistress kept her inside, day after day, cleaning and winding the yarn and choking on the fuzzy dust. Then Harriet came down with the measles. Mrs. Cook sent her straight back to Mr. Brodess, and Mr. Brodess took her to her parents' cabin. That night, Mama Rit hugged her daughter tight and rocked her gently, while Daddy Ben smoothed Harriet's ragged blanket out on the dirt floor, where all the children slept.
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.